It was Memorial Day of 2015, and my boyfriend at the time and we got an invitation to meet up with some friends who were hanging out at a marina just outside of the city we lived in. The marina wasn't in the best neighborhood, but the friends that we were meeting had hung out at this spot on the banks of the river a few times before going camping and canoeing. I'd heard from my friends too about how the last time they partied here, a guy who had just gotten out of prison ended up joining their campfire and how it had made for a great story. They all laughed about it, and it became something of a group inside joke, Tyrone asking them to play Wonderwall on the guitar all night. In fact, at just about every party, I'd heard about it. "Hey, remember that time at the marina, Tyrone?" And blah blah blah. Everyone would reminisce and cut up about how hilarious the night was. It became somewhat of a tradition for them to go to this place on summer holidays to enjoy the water and surrounding nature. So, feeling invincible and that nothing bad would happen to us, we decided to join up with our 3 friends for a night that was sure to be a good story for future parties, you know. And we did get a story to tell, but it wasn't light-hearted like singing campfire songs with a convict or anything. It was something darker, something that we'd only talk about in hushed voices at parties after we've had a few and could brave bringing the memory to light again. So, it was already dark by the time that we drove the 20 minutes out of the city to meet up with them. Honestly, I was in a sour mood because I had to work early the next morning and didn't want to be out late. But why we hadn't left hours previously to meet them is beyond me. But knowing my boyfriend, myself, and our crew of friends, we'd end up drinking on the riverbank until we were too drunk to drive home anyway, fall asleep outside. My phone would die and my alarm wouldn't go off anyway, and I'd miss work and get in big trouble. I remember standing in the parking lot once we arrived and feeling really unsettled. I was pounding against the trunk of my boyfriend's car and giving him a stern talk, saying, "Look, we can't be out here too late. I have to work tomorrow. If we end up camping here tonight, I'm going to be pissed. I don't even want to be here now." But since he was the one who had driven us out there and was looking forward to hanging out with friends, I didn't push it too much. He promised that we wouldn't be out late and that we wouldn't get drunk. I also demanded that he take me home right then because I felt so uncomfortable being there, but I didn't want to ruin our entire night, so at the time, I just chalked it up to being in a bad mood and acting like a Debbie Downer. But what ended up happening later told me that I should have listened to my instincts and gotten the hell out of there ASAP. The marina is essentially just a big parking lot with a couple of boat launches and a pathway that went into the surrounding woods around the river. It was isolated, poorly lit, and since it was a long holiday weekend, all types of people were out partying in the woods. There were at least 4 other cars in the lot, one of which was our friend's car, and we unpacked the car and started walking through the woods on a narrow path with a 6-pack of beer and our phone flashlights to see in the darkness. Our friends were already out on the riverbank with their canoe and had texted us their location. My boyfriend had also been there before, so I just followed his lead. After a few minutes of walking into the woods, we heard 2 guys behind us talking in slurred speech to each other, saying something to us like, "You guys have a good night, okay?" We assumed that they were just wasted or high and laughed, responding, "Yeah, we're just getting started." They mumbled more to each other incoherently and went off a different path into the woods with their flashlight. We didn't get a good look at them, but I remember that they were wearing gym shorts and cut-off muscle shirts. It had startled me a bit because they seemed to have just come out of nowhere, but they didn't seem threatening, so we brushed it off and weren't concerned that we had run into other people since we knew that we weren't the only ones at the marina. But now, it seems they could have been stalking our movements over the course of the evening because of what was to follow. So, before I proceed, I'll try to explain the landscape a little more for details that will be relevant later on. We were directly on a rocky riverbank, so to our one side was water and to our back was the woods. We had entered the woods from the left end of the parking lot, if you're facing the river, and took a path that eventually forked in the middle. Once you reached the fork, by going down the right path about 50 feet or so, you wound up at our campsite in the riverbank. If you stayed straight on the path, you went deeper into the woods until the path met some fallen trees, really overgrown brush, and just ended. The spot that we had picked had a large flat open embankment, but further up, the path pretty much just dropped off into the water as it was on a steeper part of the hillside. It seemed to us at the time that there was one way in and one way out of the area, and that anyone who went up the path essentially had to walk past where we were all sitting. I'm sure that there were other small paths around since the woods weren't super thick, but the one that we took to the water was clearly walked on frequently and often. Finally, we reached our friends who have laid out a blanket and have already cracked open some beers. We had all tended to row out to a nearby island with the canoe, but had noticed some people already set up camp at that spot and could see their campfire from the shore. Ah well, we figured this was just as good a spot as any to enjoy our evening in, and weren't miffed about the change of plans or anything, and we started to relax and had a drink ourselves, smoked some cigarettes, and then talked about starting a fire to keep warm in the cool evening. We gathered some firewood from nearby and explored the path a bit more, not running into any more people for the time being. After we started a fire and settled in for the night, I tried to cheer up and get out of my shitty mood and enjoy the company of my friends. It was difficult though, because I found myself staring down the path and jumping at every little sound or twig cracking in the distance. The guys weren't paying much attention to the surroundings and were talking loudly, in their own world. But at one point, I distinctly remember my friend's girlfriend leaning over to me and saying, "Hey, do you have a weird feeling about tonight? I just feel like something bad's going to happen." It freaked me out because I knew exactly what she was talking about. No matter how many beers I had or how much I tried to distract myself with light conversation, something about the night just felt off. It's like the air was full of electricity and danger or something. A few minutes later, a group of about 5 men, aged 20 to 25, appeared out of the tall weeds and started walking towards our fire. I could see them squinting in our direction when one of them said, "Hey, is this Joe's party?" I made out some silhouettes of figures in gym shorts, but couldn't discern any physical features because of the way the campfire was casting shadows around the trees. They had plastic bags in their hands though, which I assumed were full of towels or after swimming clothes. We all said, "Nah, sorry, you got the wrong group." They apologized for bothering us, wishing us a good evening, and started back the way they came. It seemed then that their group split off into 2 different parties though, because after the interaction, 3 of the guys stayed close by the tree line, trying to kick over a stump into the ground, making a ruckus, and 2 more had gone up further up the riverbank with their flashlights. I could see the light dancing off the tree branches in the water, but having walked farther up the path earlier with my boyfriend for firewood, remembered that the path turned into a dead end. I waited for the light to start coming back toward our campsite, or the group to walk back by us, heading back towards the parking lot, but they never passed us again. And the 3 guys messing with the stump left after a while, and I just figured they went to find Joe. The flashlight beam disappeared from view, and I just stopped thinking about it, turned my attention back to my friends, and got on with the night. So, about 20 minutes passed when our conversation was broken by something that made us all go dead silent. Suddenly, we hear a man about 50 to 75 feet away yelling loudly, "Hey, what are you doing?" Then there was a sort of shuffle of feet and movement. He yelled, "Get away from me, what do you think you're doing?" And then the sound of something making contact with skin. We could hear a struggle taking place and then help, somebody help me. And then it dissolved into what sounded like an assault of some sort. We heard something hitting something, maybe a fist in the man's body, maybe a blunt weapon or a knife as he screamed for help. We only heard his voice as the assailant seemed to have surprised the guy and began attacking him without saying anything. He yelled in agony for what seemed like forever until he finally just went silent. You could actually hear his voice weakening too. His groaning faded as it seemed that he went unconscious or worse. I can honestly say that I can never unhear that sound, even to this day. My friend yelled into the distance and it brought us all back to reality. Whatever had just happened had happened just beyond where we were sitting. We had a small fire burning and we were very clearly visible from the tree line, and 5 of us had just witnessed someone being brutally attacked. The rushes and weeds near us started rustling as all chaos broke out near our campsite. We had to leave the area, and fast, but we were cornered. We stood up, grabbing bags, shoes, and only what was necessary and within reach, and got ready to run. Someone doused the fire, and we couldn't take the path since that was likely where the attack had just taken place, and someone was probably about to burst into our campsite and ambush us. I didn't dare look behind me, and the canoe, it was the only way out. We started pushing it out into the water in a panic. I got in first, uncontrollably shaking and sobbing. My boyfriend had sense enough to grab my purse and handed it to me as he helped my friend get the canoe far enough away from the shore so that we could push off. My friend's girlfriend was holding me, trying to calm me down, but I was too afraid to move or speak. Everyone else was silent, with straight fear written on all of our faces. With 5 grown adults in a small canoe, all I could picture was the boat capsizing or something picking us off from the shore with a gun. We paddled out into the middle of the river and watched our campsite disappear around the bend, and once we felt out of threat of immediate danger, I called 911 from the boat and shakily told the police what we think had just happened. The cop on the line was impatient and terse, only saying that they'd already gotten a call about the situation and hung up on me. As we floated down the river, the boat launch at the marina came into view. We could see from the water that the parking lot was alive with ambulance and police cars, and we hurriedly docked the boat and climbed out, carrying the canoe up the ramp. Funnily enough, no one even stopped us to ask any questions or barely even noticed us. A frightened group of hippies conspicuously dragging a canoe behind them. I saw some cops walking down the pathway that led to the river with flashlights, but they weren't moving with any sense of urgency or anything. A couple of guys were talking with officers at the ambulance with their shirts off, wearing gym shorts or swim trunks, but we couldn't tell if it was members of the group that walked by our campsite claiming to be looking for Joe or somebody else. But I assumed that they had to be, since the incident happened shortly after we all crossed paths. Strangely though, no one appeared to be injured. The ambulance cab was empty and no one was in handcuffs or anything. And everyone just all seemed to be talking calmly. Something was off, but we didn't stick around to find out if they found anything in the woods. We did search the news story for weeks after the fact, and we found nothing talking about the incident. No victim, no attacker, nothing. Were we in the wrong place at the wrong time? What happened to the guy who was assaulted, or was he just faking it to fuck with us? Were we almost victimized by a group of dangerous youth that had scoped us out, seeing us as easy targets? We speculated that this could have been an attempt to lure us into the woods to jump us, among many other possibilities, but we never had any answers about what happened in the woods that night. The next day, some of the group went back to gather up supplies that we had left behind in our panic, and they didn't find anything stolen or strange on the path near where it happened. I've never been back to that marina, and that group of friends has since dissolved and moved to different parts of the world. We went out looking for an evening of fun, and we got more than we ever bargained for. I was personally traumatized for weeks after it. Any sudden noises or surprises sent me into fits of panic and sobs and shaking. And eventually, I was able to stop hearing a man scream for his life every single time that I closed my eyes.